The dust kicked up around her worn boots as Nora Everly trudged along the unpaved street of Denver, Colorado, her wicker basket growing heavier with each step, despite the dozen embroidered handkerchiefs nestled inside weighing almost nothing at all. The late summer heat of 1878 bore down on her thin shoulders, and she paused to wipe her brow with the back of her hand before knocking on yet another weathered door, praying this household might actually have a few spare coins to purchase her wares. Nobody answered at this house either. Nora sighed and moved along, her faded blue dress collecting dust at the hem. She had been walking since dawn, starting in the heart of Denver and working her way toward the outskirts where ranches sprawled across the Colorado landscape. Her stomach rumbled, reminding her that she had not eaten since yesterday afternoon when Mrs. Patterson had taken pity on her and offered a slice of bread along with her polite refusal to buy anything. At 22 years old, Nora had imagined a different life for herself. She had come west with her father 3 years ago, full of hope and dreams of a fresh start after her mother passed. But consumption had taken her father last winter, leaving her alone in a boarding house with debts to pay and no family to turn to. The embroidery work she did was her only skill, transforming plain cotton squares into something beautiful with her needle and thread. She spent her evenings stitching by candlelight, then spent her days walking door to door, trying to sell enough to pay for her room and meals. The road stretched before her, leading away from the main cluster of buildings toward open range. She could see a large ranch house in the distance, sitting proud against the backdrop of the Rocky Mountains. Smoke curled from its chimney, a sign of life. Nora adjusted her basket and kept walking, even though her feet ached and blisters had formed on her heels. The ranch was further than it appeared. By the time she reached the wooden gate marking the property line, the sun had shifted considerably in the sky. A sign hung above the entrance reading Northfield Ranch. The property was impressive, with a well-maintained fence running along the perimeter and cattle dotting the distant fields. Nora hesitated, suddenly aware of how bedraggled she must appear, but necessity pushed her forward. She needed to make at least one sale today. The main house was a sturdy 2-story structure built from timber and stone, clearly the home of someone with means. Nora climbed the steps to the wide front porch and knocked firmly on the solid oak door. She waited, listening to the sound of boots approaching from inside. The door swung open, and Nora found herself looking up at one of the tallest men she had ever seen. He stood well over 6 feet, with broad shoulders that filled the doorframe and sun-bronzed skin that spoke of long days working outdoors. Dark hair fell slightly over his forehead, and when his eyes met hers, she was struck by their unusual color, a deep green like pine needles in shadow. "Can I help you, miss?" His voice was deep but not unkind, holding a hint of curiosity. Nora straightened her spine, summoning what remained of her dignity. "Good afternoon, sir. My name is Nora Everly, and I am selling handkerchiefs, fine embroidered work, each one unique. They make excellent gifts or can serve practical purposes for a gentleman such as yourself." She lifted the basket so he could see the contents. The handkerchiefs truly were beautiful, even if she thought so herself. Each one featured different designs, wildflowers, geometric patterns, even one with a bucking horse she had been particularly proud of. The man studied the basket, then looked back at her face. His expression was unreadable. "How much are you asking?" 25 cents each, sir. Though I could make an exception for multiple purchases." He crossed his arms over his chest, and Nora noticed how the simple cotton shirt stretched across his frame. "Where are you from, Miss Everly?" The question caught her off guard. "I live in Denver, sir, in a boarding house on Larimer Street." "And you walked all the way out here? Yes, sir, I go door to door most days. Something flickered in his eyes. Concern, perhaps, or maybe pity. Nora hated the thought of pity, but she was too tired and hungry to let pride stop her from making a sale. How many do you have there? He asked, nodding toward the basket. 12, sir, all hand-stitched by myself. I will take them all. Nora blinked, certain she had misheard. I am sorry, sir, all 12. I will buy all of them. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a leather wallet, extracting several coins. That would be $3, correct? Yes, but sir, surely you do not need 12 handkerchiefs. A smile tugged at the corner of his mouth, the first real expression she had seen from him. Perhaps not, but you look like you have been walking all day, and I suspect you need the money more than I need to question what I do with my purchases. He held out the coins, and Nora found her hand trembling slightly as she accepted them. $3. That would cover her room for the week and leave enough for proper meals. Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. She carefully removed all 12 handkerchiefs from her basket and handed them to him. I truly appreciate your kindness. What is your name? He asked as she turned to leave. Nora Everly, sir. I mentioned it before. I am Marcus Northfield. This is my ranch. It is a fine property, Mr. Northfield. He looked at her for a long moment, and Nora felt heat rise to her cheeks that had nothing to do with the summer sun. There was something intense about his gaze, as though he was trying to solve a puzzle. Have you eaten today, Miss Everly? The question was so direct that Nora found herself answering honestly before she could think better of it. Not yet, sir. I have been walking since dawn. Marcus frowned. Come inside. My housekeeper has prepared enough food for an army as usual. You can have a meal before you walk back to town. Oh, I could not impose on your hospitality, sir. It is not an imposition. It is common decency. His tone left no room for argument. Besides, it is a long walk back to Denver, and the sun will be setting in a few hours. You should not be on the road after dark. He was right about that. Nora had heard enough stories about the dangers that lurked on empty roads after nightfall. Still, accepting charity from a stranger felt uncomfortable, even if that stranger had just bought all her handkerchiefs. I insist, Marcus said, stepping back and holding the door open wider. Please. Something in his voice, a genuine warmth beneath the firm tone, made Nora nod and step across the threshold. The interior of the house was as impressive as the exterior, with a large entrance hall leading to several rooms. The floors were polished wood, and the furniture, while simple in style, was clearly well made and expensive. Marcus led her down a hallway to a spacious dining room. A long table dominated the space, capable of seating at least a dozen people. Please sit, he said, gesturing to one of the chairs. I will let Mrs. Crawford know we have a guest. He disappeared through a doorway, and Nora heard voices from what she assumed was the kitchen. She sat gingerly on the edge of one of the chairs, feeling out of place in this fine house with her dusty dress and worn boots. A moment later, a plump woman with gray hair appeared carrying a tray laden with food. Her face was kind, with laugh lines around her eyes and mouth. Well, hello there, dear. Mr. Northfield says you have been walking all day. Let me get some proper food into you. She set down plates of roasted chicken, fresh bread, vegetables, and a tall glass of water. Nora's mouth watered at the sight and smell. Thank you, madam. This is very generous. Nonsense. We have plenty, and you look like you could use a good meal, Mrs. Crawford patted her shoulder before returning to the kitchen. Marcus came back into the room and sat across from Nora. Please eat. Nora did not need further encouragement. She tried to maintain her manners, but the food was so delicious and her hunger so intense that she found herself eating faster than was probably proper. Marcus watched her with that same unreadable expression, but he did not make her feel uncomfortable about it. When she finally slowed down, having consumed more food than she had eaten in the past 3 days combined, she took a sip of water and met his eyes. "Thank you, Mr. Northfield. You have been remarkably kind to a stranger. You walked all the way out here trying to make an honest living. That deserves respect, not judgment." He leaned back in his chair. "Do you have any family in Denver?" "No, sir. My father passed last winter. It has been just me since then." "I am sorry for your loss." "Thank you." Nora folded her napkin carefully. "My mother died back in Missouri before we came west. My father thought a new start might help, but he took ill within a year of arriving. Consumption. That is a hard disease." "Yes." Nora did not elaborate. The months of watching her father slowly waste away were not memories she liked to revisit. "But I am managing. The embroidery work keeps me occupied, and as long as I can sell enough each week, I can pay for my room and board." Marcus frowned slightly. "How much do you typically sell in a week?" "It varies. Some weeks are better than others. Today has been my best day in quite some time, thanks to your purchase." "What happens on the weeks when you do not sell enough?" Nora shifted uncomfortably. "I manage, sir. Sometimes Mrs. Patterson at the boarding house lets me help with cleaning or cooking to make up the difference." The frown deepened. "That is not a stable situation." "It is what I have, Mr. Northfield. Not everyone has the fortune of owning a successful ranch." He acknowledged the point with a slight nod. "How many handkerchiefs can you make in a week?" "If I work every evening, perhaps 15 or 16. Though I need money to buy the fabric and thread, which cuts into my profits." Marcus was quiet for a moment, his fingers drumming lightly on the table. Nora could practically see thoughts turning over in his mind, but she had no idea what he was thinking. "What if I told you I could offer you a business arrangement?" he finally said. Nora tilted her head. "What sort of arrangement?" "I need someone to help manage the household here. Mrs. Crawford does her best, but she is getting older and this house is large. I also host dinners occasionally for business associates and neighbors, and having someone who could handle the details of such events would be valuable. In exchange, you would have a room here, all meals provided, and a fair wage. You could still do your embroidery work in your spare time if you wished, for your own profit." The offer was so unexpected that Nora could only stare at him. "Mr. Northfield, you do not even know me. Why would you offer me employment based on a single meeting?" "I am a good judge of character, Miss Everly. You walked miles in the heat to sell handkerchiefs rather than beg or turn to less savory means of survival. You have pride and determination. Those are qualities I value." He paused. "And frankly, you need the stability, and I need the help. It seems like a mutually beneficial arrangement." Nora's mind raced. Living on a ranch with steady employment and regular meals would solve all her immediate problems. But moving to a ranch owned by a man she had just met, even with a housekeeper present, would certainly raise eyebrows. Then again, continuing to barely scrape by in Denver while hoping each week brought enough sales to survive was no real alternative. "Would this arrangement be proper, sir?" "I do not wish to compromise my reputation. Mrs. Crawford lives here and would serve as chaperone. Additionally, I employ several ranch hands who bunk in a separate building on the property, so you would hardly be alone with me. Everything would be entirely proper, I assure you." It was a logical answer, and Nora found herself wanting to say yes. Still, caution made her hesitate. "May I ask why you need help, sir? Surely many women in Denver would be interested in such a position." Marcus stood and walked to the window, looking out over his land. "I built this ranch from almost nothing, Miss Everly. 5 years ago, I had a small plot and a dozen cattle. Now I have hundreds of head and one of the most profitable operations in the region. But I have been so focused on building the business that I have neglected the home. Mrs. Crawford is wonderful, but she cannot do everything, and I need someone who can bring organization and perhaps a woman's touch to the household. He turned back to face her. As for why I am offering this to you rather than advertising in town, I suppose I believe in seizing opportunities when they present themselves. You came to my door today. That seems like fate if one believes in such things. Nora stood as well, her legs feeling steadier now that she had food in her stomach. She thought about her tiny room in the boarding house, about the endless days of walking and rejection, about the uncertainty of her future. Then she thought about this house, about regular meals and a wage she could save, about not having to worry if she would make rent each week. I accept your offer, Mr. Northfield. When would you like me to start? A genuine smile spread across his face, transforming his features from merely handsome to something that made Nora's heart skip unexpectedly. Would tomorrow be too soon? I could have one of my ranch hands drive you back to Denver this evening to collect your things and settle matters with your boarding house. He could bring you back here tomorrow morning. That would be very helpful, thank you. Marcus called for Mrs. Crawford and explained the situation. The older woman's face lit up with delight. Oh, how wonderful! It will be so nice to have another woman in the house. And you seem like such a sweet girl, Miss Everly. Please call me Nora. Then you must call me Margaret. She clasped Nora's hands warmly. We will get along just fine. I am sure of it. True to his word, Marcus arranged for one of his ranch hands, a young man named Tommy, to drive Nora back to Denver in a wagon. The ride was far more pleasant than the long walk had been, and Tommy kept up a cheerful stream of conversation about life on the ranch. Mr. Northfield is a good man, Tommy said as they approached the city. Fair and honest, works harder than anyone I have ever seen. He is up before dawn most days and often does not stop until well after sunset. How long have you worked for him? Nora asked. 2 years now. Best job I have had. He pays well and treats everyone with respect. You made a good choice accepting his offer, miss. Nora hoped Tommy was right. She directed him to the boarding house and went inside to pack her few belongings and speak with Mrs. Patterson. The landlady was surprised but understanding when Nora explained she had found employment. It sounds like a good opportunity, dear, though I will miss having you here. You were always so quiet and respectful. Mrs. Patterson accepted payment for the final week, even though Nora had only stayed a few days of it. Consider the rest a parting gift. You have always paid on time and helped out when I needed it. Nora felt tears prick her eyes at the kindness. Thank you, Mrs. Patterson. You have been very fair to me. She packed her few dresses, her sewing supplies, and the book of poetry her mother had given her years ago. Everything she owned fit into a single worn carpet bag. Looking around the small room one last time, Nora felt no sadness at leaving. This had been a place of survival, not a home. Perhaps the ranch could become something more. Tommy was waiting with the wagon, and they started back toward Northfield Ranch. The sun was setting now, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. The mountains stood like sentinels in the distance, their peaks still capped with snow even in late summer. Will I be expected to help with the cattle? Nora asked, suddenly wondering what exactly her duties would entail. Tommy laughed. No, miss. That is what we ranch hands are for. You will be helping in the house, from what Mr. Northfield said, though I suspect he will explain everything more clearly tomorrow. They arrived at the ranch after dark. Margaret was waiting and showed Nora to a room on the second floor. It was easily 3 times the size of her room at the boarding house, with a real bed frame and mattress, a dresser, a washstand, and even a small desk by the window. "This is beautiful," Nora breathed. "I am glad you like it." The house has 6 bedrooms, but only Mr. Northfield and I live here regularly, so we have plenty of space. Your room is at the far end of the hall. Mr. Northfield's room is at the other end, and mine is in between, just so you know. Margaret winked. "All proper." Nora smiled. "Thank you, Margaret. Get some rest, dear. Tomorrow will be busy as we show you everything." After Margaret left, Nora unpacked her few belongings and changed into her nightgown. She sat on the edge of the bed, testing the mattress. It was soft and comfortable, such a change from the thin, lumpy one at the boarding house. She walked to the window and looked out over the dark landscape. Somewhere out there, Marcus Northfield was probably still working, even at this late hour if Tommy's description was accurate. She thought about him, about his green eyes and the way he had looked at her with something she could not quite identify. Interest, concern. She was not sure, but something about him made her pulse quicken in a way she had not experienced before. Nora climbed into bed and blew out the candle. Tomorrow would be the start of her new life. She fell asleep quickly, exhausted from the long day, and for the first time in months, she did not worry about what tomorrow would bring. The next morning, Nora woke to sunlight streaming through the window and the smell of coffee and bacon wafting up from downstairs. She dressed quickly in her best dress, a simple gray cotton that was worn but clean, and braided her dark hair. Looking in the small mirror above the washstand, she pinched her cheeks to bring some color to them and hoped she looked presentable. When she came downstairs, she found Margaret in the kitchen, already busy preparing breakfast. The room was large and well-equipped, with a massive cast iron stove, multiple work surfaces, and shelves lined with supplies. "Good morning, Nora. Did you sleep well?" "Better than I have in months," Nora admitted. "That bed is wonderful." "Good, good. Now, let me show you how things work around here, and then we can discuss your specific duties." Margaret poured her a cup of coffee. "Mr. Northfield takes breakfast at 6 o'clock sharp every morning. He is very punctual about meals, one of his few predictable habits. Lunch is at noon when he comes back from working the range, and dinner is at 7. On Sundays, we have a larger midday meal after he returns from town. Does he attend church?" "Sometimes, though not every week." "He is not particularly religious, but he believes in maintaining good relationships with the community." Margaret began loading a tray with food. "Usually I take breakfast to the dining room, but since you are here now, perhaps you could start by doing that." Nora took the tray, feeling a flutter of nervousness at seeing Marcus again. She carried it carefully to the dining room and found him already seated at the table, reading a newspaper. He looked up as she entered and stood immediately. "Good morning, Miss Everly. Or should I say, good morning, Nora, since we will be working together." "Good morning, Mr. Northfield." She set the tray down and began arranging the plates. "Please call me Marcus. We need not stand on such formality here." Nora met his eyes. "That would not be entirely proper, sir." "Perhaps not by strict society standards, but we are not in a city ballroom. We are on a ranch in Colorado, and life here is more practical than formal." He sat back down. "At least when it is just us and the staff. If we have guests, you may use whatever address you feel comfortable with." "Very well, Marcus." His name felt strange on her tongue, intimate somehow. He smiled. "Much better. Will you join me? Margaret always makes far too much food. I am sure she expected me to eat in the kitchen with her. I am sure she will not mind if you eat here. In fact, I insist. Part of your role will be hosting when we have guests, so you should grow comfortable dining in here." Nora hesitated, then fetched a plate from the sideboard and served herself a modest portion. She sat at the side of the table, not too close but not at the far end either. They ate in silence for a few moments before Marcus spoke. "I thought today we could go over the household accounts, and I can explain what I hope you will manage. Then Margaret can show you the rest of the house and explain the daily routines." "That sounds reasonable." I should also mention that Tommy and the other ranch hands eat their meals in the bunkhouse, where they have their own cooking setup, so you need not worry about feeding the entire crew. "How many men work here?" "6 currently, though that number increases during certain seasons." "Roundup and branding time require extra hands." Nora nodded, absorbing the information. "And what exactly are your expectations for my role here?" Marcus set down his fork. "Primarily, I need someone to manage the household inventory, ensure supplies are ordered and maintained, oversee cleaning and maintenance, and coordinate meals with Margaret. Additionally, as I mentioned, I occasionally host dinners for business associates or neighboring ranchers. Those events require planning and execution, which I am frankly terrible at handling. I can certainly manage those things. I helped my mother run our household back in Missouri before she passed." "Good." Marcus paused. "I should also be honest with you. There is another reason I need someone in this role. I am under some pressure from certain members of the community to marry and settle down. They seem to think a successful rancher of 28 should have a wife and children by now." Nora's heart sank slightly, though she was not sure why. Of course a man like Marcus would be considering marriage. "Are you planning to marry soon?" "Not particularly, but having a properly run household might ease some of that pressure. People will see that I have my life organized and perhaps stop trying to set me up with every available woman in Denver." He said it lightly, but Nora detected a hint of frustration beneath the humor. "I see. So I am essentially providing you with social cover." "That is a rather cynical way to phrase it, but not entirely inaccurate." He met her eyes directly. "Does that bother you?" Nora considered. "I suppose not. You are still paying me for legitimate work, and I benefit from the arrangement. What you do or do not do regarding marriage is your own business. I appreciate your pragmatic view." Marcus finished his coffee. "Shall we look at the accounts?" They spent the next hour in Marcus's study, a room lined with books and dominated by a large desk covered with papers. He walked her through the household finances, showing her how much was budgeted for various expenses and explaining his system for tracking everything. Nora found it somewhat chaotic but said nothing, making mental notes about how she could organize it better. "I know it is a mess," Marcus admitted, seeing her expression. "Record keeping is not my strength. I can work with this. It just needs some structure." After the financial review, Margaret took over, giving Nora a complete tour of the house and explaining all the daily routines. The place was even larger than Nora had realized, with multiple rooms on the first floor including a formal parlor that was rarely used, Marcus's study, the dining room, a large kitchen, and a mudroom. Upstairs held 6 bedrooms and a bathroom with an actual indoor water closet, a luxury Nora had rarely encountered. "Mr. Northfield insisted on having indoor plumbing installed last year," Margaret explained. "Cost him a fortune, but he said it was worth it. The man likes his conveniences when he can get them." They also went outside to see the smokehouse, the root cellar, the chicken coop, and the large garden behind the house. "I try to keep the garden going, but my knees are not what they used to be," Margaret said. "If you have any skill with growing things, I would welcome the help. My mother taught me about gardening. I would be happy to help." By lunchtime, Nora's head was spinning with information, but she felt confident she could handle her new responsibilities. Marcus came in from the range, dusty and smelling of horses and leather, and washed up before sitting down for the midday meal. "How is your first official day going?" he asked as Nora served the food. "Very well. Margaret has been wonderfully helpful. She is a treasure. I do not know what I would do without her." Marcus accepted his plate with thanks. "This afternoon I need to ride out to check on the northern herd. You are welcome to join me if you would like to see more of the ranch." "Do you ride?" Nora shook her head. "I never learned. We did not have horses in the city. Would you like to learn? It is nearly essential out here." The idea was both terrifying and thrilling. "I suppose I should. Then we will start with something gentle. I have a mare that is perfect for beginners." Marcus smiled. "Do not worry. I will not let you fall." After lunch, Marcus brought around 2 horses, his own large gelding and a smaller chestnut mare with a kind eye. "This is Clementine. She is old enough to have good sense and patient enough for a new rider." He showed Nora how to approach the horse, how to check the saddle and stirrups, and finally how to mount. It took her several attempts, and she was grateful Marcus did not laugh at her awkwardness. Once she was finally seated, the ground seemed very far away. "Hold the reins like this," Marcus demonstrated, "and press with your legs to move forward. Clementine will follow my horse, so you do not need to worry too much about steering yet." They started out slowly, and Nora gripped the saddle horn with white knuckles. But as they moved at a gentle walk across the ranch land, she began to relax slightly. The swaying motion was not as frightening as she had expected, and Clementine did indeed seem to know what she was doing. Marcus led them through fields dotted with cattle, explaining his operation as they went. "I run mostly Herefords now. They are hardy and good for the Colorado climate. I sell beef to markets in Denver and sometimes as far as Cheyenne." The ranch stretched for what seemed like miles. They rode past creeks lined with cottonwood trees, across open grassland, and up gentle hills that offered views of the mountains. The land was beautiful in a stark, open way that Nora had not appreciated during her door-to-door walks. Up here, on horseback with the wind in her face, she began to understand the appeal of this life. "You are doing well," Marcus called over to her. "Are you ready to try a trot?" "I do not think so. Not today," he laughed. "Fair enough, we will stick to walking." They rode for over an hour before turning back toward the ranch house. By the time they arrived, Nora's legs were trembling and her backside was sore, but she felt a sense of accomplishment. "You did very well for your first ride," Marcus said as he helped her dismount. His hands were strong and steady as they clasped her waist, lifting her down from the saddle. For a moment, they stood close together, and Nora caught the scent of him, a mixture of leather and sage and something indefinably masculine. Their eyes met, and something passed between them, a spark of recognition or possibility. Then Marcus stepped back, clearing his throat. "You should soak in a hot bath tonight. Otherwise, you will be too sore to move tomorrow. Thank you for the lesson." "My pleasure. We can go riding again whenever you like. You should know your way around the property." Over the following weeks, Nora settled into her new life with surprising ease. She established routines, reorganized the household accounts into a sensible system, and worked with Margaret to create menus and manage supplies. The work was demanding but satisfying in a way her aimless door-to-door selling had never been. She also continued her riding lessons with Marcus. At first they went out 2 or 3 times a week, but as Nora grew more confident and Marcus seemed to find excuses to teach her more, the rides became nearly daily occurrences. They would spend an hour or two riding across the ranch, and Marcus would tell her stories about building his operation or point out features of the land. Nora found herself looking forward to these rides more than she probably should. Marcus was easy to talk to once she got past his sometimes gruff exterior. He had a dry sense of humor and a sharp intelligence that she appreciated. He asked her about her life, seemed genuinely interested in her thoughts and opinions, and treated her as an equal rather than an employee. More troubling was the way her heart raced when he was near, or how she found herself watching for him through the windows, or how she caught herself taking extra care with her appearance on days she knew they would ride together. She tried to dismiss these feelings as simple gratitude or admiration, but deep down, Nora knew she was developing feelings that went beyond what was appropriate for an employer and employee. If Marcus noticed any of this, he gave no sign. He was always perfectly proper, always maintaining the right distance, even as he shared more of himself with her. She learned that he had grown up in Texas, the youngest of 4 brothers, and had come to Colorado to make his own way rather than work on his family's ranch. She learned that he loved the land with an almost spiritual intensity, and that he read poetry late at night, which surprised and delighted her. One evening in early October, about 6 weeks after Nora had arrived at the ranch, Marcus announced that he would be hosting a dinner party the following weekend. Several neighboring ranchers and their wives, plus a few business associates from Denver. 12 people total. Can you manage that? Nora felt a flutter of nervousness but nodded. Of course. Margaret and I will make sure everything is perfect. They spent the week preparing, planning an elaborate menu, polishing silver, and making sure every corner of the dining room and parlor was spotless. Nora even picked flowers from the garden and created arrangements for the tables. On the evening of the dinner, Nora dressed in her best gown, a deep blue silk that had been her mother's. It was slightly out of fashion but still elegant, and Margaret had helped her alter it to fit properly. Nora pinned up her hair and looked at herself in the mirror, hardly recognizing the polished woman staring back. The guests began arriving at 7. Nora greeted them alongside Marcus, playing the role of hostess with Margaret's help. The neighboring ranchers were friendly, weathered men with their wives, most of whom seemed curious about Nora but polite. The business associates from Denver were more formal, evaluating everything with critical eyes. One man in particular, a banker named Harold Sutton, seemed especially interested in Nora. He was perhaps 40, well-dressed, with the soft hands of someone who worked indoors. "And how long have you been managing Mr. Northfield's household, Miss Everly?" "About 6 weeks, sir." "Quite an unusual arrangement, if you do not mind my saying." Nora felt her spine stiffen. "I am not sure what you mean." "A young, unmarried woman living in the home of an unmarried man. Even with a chaperone, it is bound to cause talk." Before Nora could respond, Marcus appeared at her elbow. "I am not aware that I asked for your opinion on my household arrangements, Sutton. Miss Everly is an employee, same as my ranch hands or Mrs. Crawford. Unless you make a habit of commenting on the propriety of every man who employs staff." Sutton flushed. "Of course not. I meant no offense." "Then I suggest you focus on enjoying the excellent meal Miss Everly and Mrs. Crawford have prepared." Marcus's voice was pleasant, but his eyes were hard. Sutton moved away, and Nora let out a breath she had not realized she was holding. "Thank you. You do not need to thank me." "The man is a pompous fool." Marcus lowered his voice. "Though I suppose he is not entirely wrong. People do talk. Does that bother you? Not particularly. I care more about what I think is right than what gossips say." He met her eyes. "Does it bother you?" "I have faced worse than gossip, Marcus. I can handle whatever talk there might be." The dinner itself went smoothly. The food was excellent, the conversation flowed, and several guests complimented Marcus on how well his household was run. Nora moved through the evening with growing confidence, directing Margaret and helping ensure everything went seamlessly. After the guests departed, Nora and Margaret cleaned up while Marcus retreated to his study. It was nearly midnight by the time they finished. Margaret headed to bed, but Nora was too keyed up to sleep. She went out onto the back porch, breathing in the cool night air. The sound of boots on wood made her turn. Marcus stepped out of the shadows, a glass of whiskey in his hand. "You did an excellent job tonight. Thank you." "I think it went well. It went better than well. Several people made a point of telling me how impressive the evening was." He leaned against the porch railing. "I am grateful you agreed to work here, Nora. You have made a real difference. I am grateful you gave me the opportunity. This is a much better life than selling handkerchiefs door to door." They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, looking out at the dark landscape. The moon was nearly full, casting silver light across the land. "Can I ask you something?" Nora said quietly. "Of course." "Why did you really offer me this position? You could have found someone with more experience, better references. But you took a chance on me based on a single meeting." Marcus was quiet for so long that Nora thought he might not answer. Then he said, "When you knocked on my door that day, you looked exhausted and hungry, but you held your head high. You were proud of your work, proud of yourself. I saw someone who was fighting to survive with dignity, and I respected that." He paused. "And I suppose I saw something else too." "What?" He turned to look at her, and even in the moonlight she could see the intensity in his eyes. "I saw someone I wanted to know better, someone I did not want to walk away from my door and never see again." Nora's breath caught. "Marcus, I know it is not appropriate for me to say such things. You are my employee, and there is a power imbalance, and a dozen other reasons why I should not be standing here telling you this." He set down his glass and took a step closer. "But I cannot keep pretending that I hired you purely for practical reasons. The truth is, from the moment I opened that door and saw you standing there, something inside me shifted. And spending these weeks with you, getting to know you, has only made that feeling stronger." Nora knew she should step back, should maintain the proper distance, should do 100 things other than what she did. But her heart was pounding, and her body seemed to have its own ideas. She closed the distance between them, looking up into his face. "I feel it too," she whispered. "I have been trying not to, trying to tell myself it is just gratitude or admiration. But it is more than that, and it has been since the beginning." Marcus raised his hand slowly, giving her every opportunity to pull away, and gently cupped her cheek. "Tell me to stop, and I will. Tell me this is wrong, and I will never mention it again. We can go back to being employer and employee, nothing more." Nora leaned into his touch. "I do not want you to stop." He bent his head, and his lips met hers in a kiss that was both tentative and full of barely restrained passion. Nora had been kissed before, quick stolen moments with a boy back in Missouri before her world fell apart. But this was different. This was a kiss that felt like coming home, like finding something she had not known she was searching for. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Marcus rested his forehead against hers. "What are we doing?" "I am not sure, but I do not want to stop doing it." He laughed softly. "That is not a practical answer." "When have I ever been practical?" She smiled up at him. "I moved out here to sell handkerchiefs. I accepted a job from a stranger. Practical is not exactly my strong suit." "Fair point." He kissed her again, slower this time, savoring it. "We should probably talk about this, figure out what it means." "Tomorrow," Nora said. "We can be sensible tomorrow." "Tonight, can we just—" "Yes," Marcus agreed. "Tomorrow." They stayed on the porch for another hour, talking softly and stealing kisses before finally retreating to their separate rooms. Nora lay in bed, her lips still tingling and her heart racing. Everything had just become infinitely more complicated, but she could not bring herself to regret it. The next morning brought no clarity, only more questions. How would this work? What would people say? What did Marcus want from this relationship, and what could she offer? They did not get a chance to discuss any of it. Marcus had to ride out early to deal with a fence that had been damaged in a storm, and by the time he returned, there were other matters that needed attention. Days turned into a week, and while they stole moments together, private smiles and brief touches when no one was watching, they never had the conversation they needed to have. Then one afternoon, a visitor arrived at the ranch. Nora answered the door to find a well-dressed woman in her 50s with sharp eyes and an imperious bearing. "I am here to see Marcus Northfield," the woman announced without preamble. "Tell him his mother is here." Nora blinked in surprise. Marcus had mentioned his family, but always in passing, never suggesting any of them might visit. "Of course. Please come in. I will find him immediately." She showed the woman to the parlor and went to find Marcus, who was in his study. "Your mother is here." His head snapped up. "What?" "A woman just arrived saying she is your mother. I put her in the parlor." Marcus stood, looking more unsettled than Nora had ever seen him. "I did not know she was coming. She never mentioned it in her letters. Should I bring tea?" "Yes, please, and thank you." He straightened his vest and headed toward the parlor. Nora went to the kitchen and prepared a tea tray, moving quickly. When she carried it to the parlor, she could hear raised voices. "Completely inappropriate, Marcus. A young woman living in your house and you not even married." "What were you thinking?" "I was thinking that I needed help managing the household, Mother. Nora is an employee. Do not insult my intelligence. I have seen the way you look at each other, even in the brief moment I met her at the door." Nora froze outside the door, the tray in her hands. "My personal life is my own business," Marcus said firmly. "Not when you are making a spectacle of yourself. The family name means something, Marcus, even if you chose to leave Texas." Nora took a deep breath and entered the room, setting the tea tray down as though she had heard nothing. "Will there be anything else, sir?" Marcus's mother looked at her with cold appraisal. "You may go." "Actually," Marcus said, "I would like Nora to stay. Mother, this is Nora Everly. Nora, my mother, Catherine Northfield." "How do you do, madam?" Nora said politely. Catherine's expression did not soften. "I suppose you think you have done quite well for yourself, landing in a situation like this." "Mother," Marcus's voice was sharp, "that is enough. I am simply stating facts. A woman in her position, living under your roof, it is obvious what she is after." Nora felt her face flush with anger. "I assure you, madam, I am after nothing but honest work for honest pay. If my presence here offends you, I am happy to leave." "No," Marcus said immediately. "You are not leaving. Mother, you owe Nora an apology." Catherine stood, drawing herself up to her full height. "I will not apologize for speaking the truth. If you have any sense left, Marcus, you will end this situation before it becomes an even bigger scandal." She swept out of the room, and they heard the front door slam moments later. Marcus dropped into a chair, running his hands through his hair. "I am so sorry, Nora. She had no right to speak to you that way." Nora sat down carefully, her hands shaking. "She is not entirely wrong, though, is she, about the situation being inappropriate? That does not give her the right to attack your character." "No, but Marcus, we have to face reality. People are talking, and it is going to get worse, not better, especially now that we have." She trailed off, not sure how to finish the sentence. Marcus looked at her, his expression intense. "Especially now that we have feelings for each other." "Yes." He stood and came to kneel in front of her chair, taking her hands. "Then maybe we need to change the situation." "What do you mean, marry me, Nora?" She stared at him, certain she had misheard. "What, marry me?" "Not because of what anyone else thinks or says, but because over these past 2 months, you have become the most important person in my life. Because I wake up looking forward to seeing you and I go to sleep thinking about you. Because when I imagine my future, you are in it." He squeezed her hands. I know it is fast, and I know there are practical considerations, but I also know that I do not want to lose you." Nora felt tears spring to her eyes. "Marcus, you could have anyone. Someone from a good family, someone without my history. I do not want anyone else. I want you." The woman who walked miles in the heat to sell handkerchiefs because she refused to give up. The woman who reorganized my entire household in a matter of weeks. The woman who makes me laugh and challenges me and makes me want to be better. He stood and pulled her to her feet. "Say yes." "Yes," Nora breathed. "Yes, of course, yes." He kissed her, and this time there was no hesitation, no pulling back. This was a kiss of commitment, of promise, of a future together. When they finally broke apart, Marcus was smiling. "We should probably tell Margaret before she hears it from someone else." They found the housekeeper in the kitchen, and when they shared the news, she burst into tears of joy. "Oh, I knew it. I knew from the first day there was something special between you two. This is wonderful news." "We will need to plan a wedding," Nora said, her mind already spinning with details. "Nothing too elaborate," Marcus said. "Just family and close friends. I want to make you my wife as soon as possible." Over the next month, Nora and Marcus planned their wedding while also navigating the reactions of others. Catherine Northfield returned to Texas in a huff, though Marcus's brothers sent congratulatory letters. The neighbors and ranchers who had attended the dinner party were generally supportive, though a few raised eyebrows at the speed of the courtship. Nora weathered the gossip with her head held high. She knew her own heart, and she knew Marcus's. That was all that mattered. The wedding took place on a crisp November morning in the small church in Denver. Nora wore a simple white dress that she and Margaret had sewn together, with lace trim and pearl buttons. Marcus wore a new black suit, and looked so handsome that Nora nearly forgot to breathe when she saw him waiting at the altar. They spoke their vows in front of about 30 people, Tommy and the other ranch hands, Margaret crying happy tears, several neighboring ranchers and their wives, and Marcus's eldest brother who had traveled from Texas despite their mother's disapproval. There was even Mrs. Patterson from the boarding house, who Nora had invited and who had accepted with delight. "I, Marcus, take you, Nora, to be my wife. To have and to hold from this day forward, for better or worse, for richer or poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish, until death do us part. I, Nora, take you, Marcus, to be my husband. To have and to hold from this day forward, for better or worse, for richer or poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish, until death do us part." The minister pronounced them husband and wife, and when Marcus kissed her, Nora felt like her heart might burst with happiness. The celebration afterward at the ranch was simple but joyful. Margaret had outdone herself with the food, and someone had brought a fiddle. People danced in the front room that Nora had polished to gleaming, and laughter filled the house. As the evening wore on, Marcus pulled Nora aside onto the back porch where they had shared their first kiss. "Happy, Mrs. Northfield, happier than I ever imagined possible." She leaned against him, feeling his arm wrap around her waist. "A few months ago, I was walking along dusty roads trying to sell handkerchiefs just to survive. Now I am married to the most wonderful man I have ever met, living on a beautiful ranch with a future full of possibility. It feels like a dream." "It is real," Marcus murmured, kissing the top of her head. "And it is only going to get better." That night, after all the guests had left and Margaret had discreetly retired to her room, Marcus carried Nora up the stairs to his bedroom, which was now their bedroom. He set her down gently and cupped her face in his hands. "Are you nervous?" Nora nodded. "A little, but I trust you." "I will be gentle," he promised. "And if you want to stop at any time, just say so." He kissed her softly, then helped her out of her wedding dress, his fingers patient with the buttons and laces. Nora had never been naked in front of a man before, but Marcus looked at her with such reverence that she felt no shame, only desire. Their lovemaking was tender and slow, Marcus constantly checking that she was all right, that she wanted to continue. There was some pain, as she had expected, but also pleasure and connection and a feeling of rightness that transcended the physical. Afterward, they lay tangled together in the bed, Nora's head resting on Marcus's chest as his fingers traced lazy patterns on her back. "I love you," Marcus said quietly. "I do not think I have actually said those words yet, but I do. I love you, Nora." "I love you too," she whispered. "So much it scares me sometimes." "Do not be scared. We are going to build an amazing life together." As winter set in, they settled into married life. Nora continued to manage the household, but now there was no question about her place or her role. She was the mistress of Northfield Ranch, Marcus's wife, and eventually, she hoped, the mother of his children. The weeks turned into months. Winter gave way to spring, and Nora discovered she was pregnant. Marcus was overjoyed at the news, becoming even more protective and attentive than before. He insisted she rest more, worry less, and let Margaret handle more of the physical work. Their son was born in late autumn, a healthy baby boy with his father's green eyes and his mother's dark hair. They named him Daniel, and Marcus cried when he held his son for the first time. "Thank you," he told Nora, kissing her forehead as she rested in their bed, exhausted but happy. "Thank you for this incredible gift." Over the next several years, their family grew. After Daniel came a daughter, Emma, with Nora's dark eyes and Marcus's stubborn chin. Then another son, Thomas, who was quiet and thoughtful even as a baby. The house that had once felt too large for just Marcus and Margaret now rang with the sounds of children playing and learning. Marcus proved to be a devoted father, finding time despite the demands of the ranch to play with his children, teach them about the land, and tell them stories. Nora watched him with their children and fell in love with him all over again. The ranch itself continued to prosper. Marcus expanded his operations, buying additional land and increasing his herd. He became one of the most respected ranchers in Colorado, known for his fair dealings and innovative approaches. And beside him, always, was Nora, managing their home, raising their children, and serving as his partner in every way. Catherine Northfield eventually softened, visiting to meet her grandchildren and grudgingly admitting that Marcus had chosen well. She never quite apologized to Nora for her initial harsh words, but she treated her daughter-in-law with respect, which was enough. One summer evening when Daniel was 7, Emma was 5, and Thomas was 3, Nora found herself standing on the back porch watching her children play in the yard. Marcus came up behind her and wrapped his arms around her waist. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "About the day I knocked on your door trying to sell handkerchiefs. How different everything could have been if you had just sent me away." "I could never have sent you away. I think some part of me knew from that first moment that you were going to change my life." Nora turned in his arms to face him. "You changed mine too. You saved me, Marcus." "No," he said firmly. "You saved yourself. You were surviving on your own long before I came along. I just gave you a chance to thrive." "We gave each other that chance," Nora corrected. "And look what we built." They stood together watching their children play as the sun set behind the mountains, painting the sky in brilliant colors. The land stretched out around them, their land, their home, the foundation of the life they had built together. "You ever miss it?" Marcus asked. "City life, society, the things you might have had," Nora shook her head. "Never. This is everything I need. You, our children, this ranch, this life. I would not trade it for anything." "Good," Marcus said, kissing her softly, "because I plan on keeping you forever." As the years continued to pass, their love only deepened. They faced challenges as any couple does. There were droughts that threatened the cattle, injuries that scared them, children who tested their patience, and the endless work required to maintain both a ranch and a family. But they faced everything together, and that made all the difference. Daniel grew into a young man who loved the ranch as much as his father did, learning every aspect of the operation and eventually taking on more responsibilities. Emma inherited her mother's artistic talents and her father's business sense, creating beautiful things while also keeping meticulous records. Thomas, the quiet one, surprised everyone by developing a passion for breeding better cattle, approaching it with scientific precision that fascinated the entire family. More children came, 2 more daughters who kept the house lively and filled with energy. Margaret remained with them until she passed peacefully in her sleep at the age of 78, having become as much a grandmother to their children as an employee. The ranch grew to be one of the largest operations in Colorado. Marcus became a leader in the cattle industry, traveling occasionally to Denver or Cheyenne for business, but always rushing home to Nora and their family. On their 20th anniversary, Marcus surprised Nora by presenting her with a framed handkerchief, one of the ones she had sold him on that first day. "I kept this," he said, "as a reminder of the day my life really began." Nora took the frame with trembling hands, looking at her own neat stitching from so long ago. The embroidery showed a simple wildflower, the work of a woman who had been struggling to survive. "I cannot believe you saved this." "I saved all of them," Marcus admitted. "They are in a chest in the attic. I could never bear to use them or give them away." "Why not?" "Because they represent hope. You were hoping to make a sale, hoping to survive another day. And I was hoping, though I did not fully realize it yet, that life might offer me something more than just work and solitude." He pulled her close. "Those handkerchiefs brought you to me, Nora. They are precious to me because they brought me everything I treasure most." Tears ran down Nora's cheeks as she kissed him. After 20 years, he could still make her feel like that girl at his doorstep, hoping for a chance at something better. As they grew older, they watched their children marry and have children of their own. Daniel took over more of the ranch operations, running things with his father's wisdom and his mother's organizational skills. Emma married a lawyer from Denver but remained close, visiting often with her own growing family. Thomas started an experimental breeding program that gained recognition throughout the region. Marcus and Nora became grandparents, then great-grandparents. The ranch house they had shared for so many years filled regularly with multiple generations. All descended from that chance meeting when a desperate young woman knocked on a rancher's door. On a warm summer evening, when Marcus was in his late 60s and Nora her early 60s, they sat together on that same back porch where they had shared their first kiss and their first declaration of love. "My back aches," Marcus complained good-naturedly. "And my knees are not what they used to be." "You are still the most handsome man I have ever seen," Nora said, taking his hand. Her own hands were wrinkled now, marked by decades of work and life, but his fingers intertwined with hers felt just as right as they had all those years ago. "And you are still the most beautiful woman who ever knocked on my door selling handkerchiefs." They both laughed at their old joke, worn smooth by years of repetition but still capable of bringing smiles. "Did you ever imagine this?" Nora asked, gesturing toward the house where they could hear their grandchildren playing inside. "All of this? No," Marcus admitted. "When I opened that door and saw you standing there, dusty and determined, I had no idea that I was looking at my entire future. But I am so grateful I was smart enough to buy all those handkerchiefs. You bought more than handkerchiefs that day." "I know," Marcus said softly. I bought myself a lifetime of happiness. As the sun set behind the mountains one more time, painting the Colorado sky in shades of gold and pink and purple, Marcus and Nora sat together in the home they had built and the life they had created. Their journey had started with a simple transaction: a desperate woman selling embroidered handkerchiefs to survive, and a lonely rancher looking for help managing his household. But it had become so much more. It had become a love story that would be told and retold through generations of their family. A reminder that sometimes fate comes knocking at your door when you least expect it. And sometimes the bravest thing you can do is open that door and say yes to possibility. Nora leaned her head on Marcus's shoulder, feeling his arm come around her just as it had thousands of times before. "I love you," she said. "Thank you for buying all those handkerchiefs." "Thank you for knocking on my door," Marcus replied, kissing the top of her head, "and for staying." "Always," Nora promised. "Always." And there on the porch of Northfield Ranch, surrounded by the legacy they had built together, Marcus and Nora Northfield sat in perfect contentment, their hearts as intertwined as their fingers, their love as enduring as the mountains that stood watch over the land they had made their own. The handkerchief seller and the rancher had found in each other everything they had been searching for and so much more, proving that sometimes the best love stories begin with the simplest of transactions, and a door opened at just the right moment. The stars began to appear in the darkening sky, and somewhere in the house, their great-grandson started crying, quickly soothed by his mother's voice. Life continued, generation after generation, all stemming from that one day when Marcus bought all the handkerchiefs and Nora's heart too. They had built something that would last long after they were gone, something that transcended the difficulties of those early days. From struggling door-to-door saleswoman and bachelor rancher to beloved matriarch and patriarch of a thriving family empire, they had lived a life that neither could have imagined, but both had helped create through love, dedication, and the simple choice to open their hearts to each other. Years later, when both Marcus and Nora had passed, peacefully and within months of each other, their children found those 12 handkerchiefs carefully preserved in a chest in the attic, along with a letter Marcus had written. The letter told the story of that first day, of the young woman with the basket and the determination that had captured his heart. He wrote about how he had known somehow that buying those handkerchiefs meant buying into a future he could not yet see but desperately wanted. He wrote about the 50 years they had shared, about watching their children grow, about building a life that mattered. The letter ended with simple words: "I bought handkerchiefs and gained everything." Let that be a lesson to anyone who reads this, to never underestimate the power of opening your door to possibility, of taking a chance on someone who needs one, of recognizing love when it appears on your doorstep. Those handkerchiefs represented Nora's hope, determination, and talent. Buying them gave me the opportunity to know the woman who made them, and knowing her gave me the only life I ever wanted to live. Those 12 handkerchiefs were distributed among their children and grandchildren, treasured heirlooms that carried the story of Marcus and Nora, the rancher and the handkerchief seller who fell in love and built an empire on the Colorado plains. Each descendant who received one was told the story, keeping alive the memory of that first meeting and the love that grew from it. The Northfield Ranch continued to thrive under Daniel's leadership, and eventually his children's, remaining in the family for generations. And always, the story of how it all began, with a knock on the door and a basket of embroidered handkerchiefs, was told and retold, a reminder that love can find you in the most unexpected ways, and that taking a chance on someone can change not just your life, but the lives of generations to come. In the small cemetery on the ranch property, beneath the vast Colorado sky, Marcus and Nora were buried side by side, their headstones simple but bearing an inscription chosen by their children. He bought handkerchiefs. She sold her wares. Together they built a love that lasted forever. And so their story ended where it had begun, on the land Marcus had built and Nora had made into a home, surrounded by the family they had created and the love that had sustained them through every challenge and triumph. The handkerchief seller and the rancher had lived a full, rich, beautiful life together, proving that sometimes the greatest treasures come in the smallest packages, and that an open door and an open heart can lead to happiness beyond imagining. Their love story became legend in the family, each generation hearing about how great-grandmother Nora had walked miles in the heat selling handkerchiefs, how great-grandfather Marcus had bought them all in a moment of instinct he never regretted, and how from that simple transaction had grown a love that defined their entire family's history. And somewhere, preserved in frames and treasured in drawers throughout the homes of their descendants, those 12 handkerchiefs remained, beautiful and fading but still bearing witness to the truth that love can bloom from the most unlikely beginnings, that kindness can change everything, and that sometimes when you open your door to help someone, you are really opening the door to your own happiness. The story of Marcus and Nora Northfield lived on, told at family gatherings and passed down through the years, a testament to the power of taking chances, extending kindness, and recognizing love when it appears unexpectedly on your doorstep with a basket of handkerchiefs and a heart full of hope.